name is Sean Hendricks. I'm here at the Autodesk booth at SIGGRAPH 2014, and I've got with me Kevin Margo, who just recently completed a animation project of his own called Construct. I think a lot of you have probably seen something about this online, and I want to take this chance, seeing that you were here at the show at the same time I was, to sit down with you and talk a little bit about the project, kind of how you did it, the cool technology and tools. But I guess to start off, why don't we just frame things with who you are and kind of how you fit into the world of VFX and animation.
Sure. Well, I'm a VFX and CG supervisor at Blur Studio. I've been there almost 12 years now, and started out as an environment modeler, lighting and scene assembly, compositing, and worked my way into CG supervision. Blur is known for the CG work that we do, all CG work, the game cinematics, but we dabble in the live action VFX world as well, and we've started to get a little more into that the last few years. So I've been able to start souping shows with live action elements into play.
Thor and stuff like that.
Thor, the opening prologue, yes. Yeah.
Cool. And now the question that everyone has to ask when you do a pet project of this kind of scale, and you're also working at a place like Blur. I mean, I've known Blur for a long time, and they're not a place that leaves you a lot of idle time in your life. How do you fit in a project like this with that?
Nights and weekends and a lot of coffee, and you pound through it. But yes, it's been a lot of the people that have been helping out on Construct, I work with at Blur, so it's been kind of a side thing for all of us, and it's been a really great experience. Being able to say, hey, there's this cool new stuff that I want to try. We don't have the budgets internally to be able to explore this kind of stuff. Let's try and do it on the nights and weekends. And a lot of the technology that we're trying to develop was a great motivator to help the team create the assets and just get on board and produce really great content.
Cool. Well, I give you full props for the energy level that must have taken. I've seen a lot of very exhausted people working in VFX, and to take on a second project at the same time, that takes extra motivation. So why don't we take a look at some of the kind of the visuals and things you're talking about around Construct here.
All right, so I mentioned all this day job stuff at Blur. I also like to produce my own short films. A few years ago, I picked up a 5D and started messing around with it, and realized I could get some pretty cool visuals together. And
discovered the real world was fun. And
yeah. And then apply all this CG stuff that I've been developing over the years, to that, and I made this really refreshing and rewarding film. Okay, so then Construct the teaser. So this is the first chunk of finished rendered shots that I have for the entire short film. It'll be about 8 minutes long when it's done. I accelerated this portion of the development for GTC in March this year. I wanted to get together something of substance that I could show off how we're using. Oh yeah, another thing is we're using GPUs to render this whole project. We're not using the CPUs to render. So the GTC conference NVIDIA hosts, they wanted to be able to see some content and show off how I'm using their GPUs. So I accelerated this part of the short film, and then the other reason why I accelerated a part of it was to be able to get assets together that I could then go into MotionBuilder and RT that I'll show you later.
Perfect. Now, just to kind of frame this up front, and I'm sure some of this is in some of your other slides, but you did tackle this in a very unusual way, this project, in that not the normal, say, full-on rendering where you're sending it off to a render farm and letting it calculate for the next 3 months. You're not dealing with any of that. But also kind of the performance capture aspect of what you did. So maybe you could just up front kind of talk a little bit about the look of the pipeline, what it was you were doing.
So, it's I'm not an animator per se. I don't have a skill set in that. That's why motion capture is appealing, is that it can, enable me, who doesn't have those skills, to generate a lot of, content pretty quickly and relatively easily. And also, I'm a naturalist. I love photorealistic rendering, and I like naturalistic performances by the digital characters. So all that combined made me want to use the motion capture aspect. We at Blur have done a lot of motion capture projects in the past. One of the guys that's helped out on Construct does a lot of the mocap TDing at Blur, and so we're familiar with the software MotionBuilder and how to actually you work in the volume and generate the content and then clean it up and get it back into 3D Max in this case.
Okay, so not only did you do kind of the motion capture thing, but the fact that you guys actually modified MotionBuilder for all intents and purposes to fit Vray into it. I know we were talking earlier, and it was one of my first questions for you was, what made you think I can cram Vray into MotionBuilder?
Yeah. Well, the first thing is, as soon as I saw that little like renderer button show up in 2014, I'm like, so I mentioned it. I showed you that I do my own short films. Right. I shot a live action short film a few years ago, and I saw that there was a lot of great experiences that I was missing in the all-CG pipeline, and most of that revolved around spontaneity, creativity, this kind of unspoken tension between all these elements in play at the same time.
Right.
Whereas with an all-CG process, you miss a lot of that. It's a compartmentalized pipeline, whereas one artist might be doing previs, and then months later a lighting artist might be creating the lighting that you would be seeing in the shot. So there was this, span of time, span of artists, in which there would be an ambiguity of the final result. So I wanted to figure out how to get all this together at the same time, to be visualized at the same time, and be able to be bought off on by a director, right there up front in MotionBuilder and the performance capture phase.
Perfect. Well, why don't we take a look at some of your other things? And it looks like our slide deck has decided to go all white on us.
Yes. So the full short film will be about 8 minutes long, and you saw in that teaser, basically that's Android Bill. He shows up to work early one morning and stumbles onto some shady stuff going down. What this is implying is that there's this world, near future society. Robotics and AI have advanced to a point where you have these sentient robots trying to insert themselves into a human population and try and get by. There's obvious political and social tensions because of that. Android Bill, I mentioned, he is a returning war veteran. Think of a DARPA robot. The government sent him overseas to fight a war, and now he's back home. He's sentient, so he's entitled to live a life. He's trying to assimilate into civilian society, and he's having trouble. So he takes a job as a construction worker on a construction site. Cue the teaser where you see him showing up to work early one morning, and where he shouldn't. He saw some stuff. A huge fight ensues, and his family gets pulled into the mix. And now he's not only fighting for himself, but for the safety of his family. I'll show you a little. So this is a very rough early work in progress of, this is a flying subway car. It's called the MTU vehicle. It arrives in front of the construction site. Bill drops his wife and kid off, or his wife and kid drops Bill off to work. They get back onto the vehicle and they go fly off. Mom's going to take him to school, and mom's going to go off to work. She works in the government. She's got kind of a high-paying position of stature. So that's just like raw mocap.
So that's basically straight out of the system.
Yeah, using Vray RT inside of Max, and just dropping the raw motion capture out of MotionBuilder onto the rigs in Max, doing a quick render overnight with the GPUs. Again, being able to get this kind of quality using a few GPUs overnight, it's really great. You can block out the scene, get a feel for how the characters are moving around, and then start to think about how you're going to drop the cameras in. I mentioned it was rendered all on the GPU, NVIDIA GPUs, and that was kind of a big, knowing that we were doing this nights and weekends on the side, limited artistic resources. I want to figure out how to amplify their output as much as possible. Right. So that means low on infrastructure and hardware, and big on fast returns. So the GPUs allow for both of that. You can get up to 14 times faster in some scenarios, return back to the artist, and just on a few cards instead of a big room with a CPU render farm and air conditioning and all that stuff. You don't have to support that anymore. There we go. Okay, so this is me and Max just doing some kind of demoing some lighting adjustments, some look dev. I'm rotating around the scene. This is a pre-recorded performance, and what this is intended to show off is how I'm using the GPUs to relight very quickly, very seamlessly.
Instantaneous feedback.
It's very intuitive. You can get the feedback, instantaneously. The final render of that teaser, I rendered in 5 days in my studio apartment. using a bunch of nice boxes that were provided to me with a bunch of really great NVIDIA GPUs.
It's quite a heat sink you got going on.
Yes. I had my doors open 24/7 just to let a breeze come through and cool out the apartment. And then the HD frame times using the GPUs were between like 4 and 15 minutes. And this is just like raw path tracing. There's no like caching or anything involved. So
it's just
full
force.
HD, full HD frames using that rendering algorithm is at those frame times is really exciting. We want to show you that. And then the other cool thing that we're doing is we're exploring how to put the GPU to use in other ways. So you can render more minutes of footage because you can render so much more faster, or you can render the same frames just like at crazy specs, like 4K stereo, 60 frames per second.
As you would.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah, because I just want to see it. It's like, but yeah, we're using that NVIDIA cluster and just kind of back of the envelope math, just taking a project, let's say that teaser, a 10-year workstation CPU render, you can reduce it down to 9.5 hours on the VCA, using Vray. It's pretty crazy. Okay, so now let's get back to the motion capture stuff and the MotionBuilder stuff. So you guys know about performance capture, motion capture, how to do all that stuff. All right, so I mentioned this is about an 8-minute short. You saw a minute of it. There's this big fight. I have an edit here that is a live action edit of the fight sequence cut together. So I'll pull you that. Oops. So when you're shooting on set, a lot of times you'll have witness cameras just to further help inform like the animators when they're cleaning up the mocap and like doing the final animation and everything. So we're always shooting this kind of stuff. So here's an edit that we cut together like that night or a day or two later that really helps to black out the scene from camera angles and to give the director a sense of what the final product might be looking like. Only we're using live action footage.
Love that you've added sparks to it.
Yeah, we had it.
Not that bit. Huh?
Yeah, it helps. That you got important story beats that you got to hit. Okay, so you can also do virtual cinematography in the volume too. It's a monitor on sticks. You track it and you pump an image back into it. MotionBuilder up until 2014, the only thing you get is an OpenGL viewport.
Right.
And you were forced to, as a cinematographer, try and compose to an image that looked like that. What I wanted to be able to do was take the Vray RT look dev example that I just showed you, all that path tracing and progressive rendering in real time, and get that on top of MotionBuilder into the viewport of the monitor of the camera operator.
Right.
So that was a big thing. I started collaborating with Chaos Group, and we came up with Vray for MotionBuilder. So this is in Just Cause Entertainment in Marina Del Rey, down in Los Angeles. And we're using a Vicon camera system. We're using an OptiTrack VCS camera rig. This camera rig is awesome. It's got a bunch of hotkeys that you can remap and bind to control various parameters of the camera.
Make it run like a camera.
Yeah. Field of view, f-stop. You can control like MotionBuilder commands like start, stop, rewind, record. It's a very, very intuitive device.
So him looking at himself.
So we're tracking Darren there, we're tracking the camera, and then we're pumping that through Vray RT, which is receiving all the real-time data that MotionBuilder is sending to it, path tracing that scene, and then sending it back to the camera monitor there. So now the cinematographer can be looking at, physically based rendered imagery at interactive frame rates. And then it's like virtual reality stuff you can get into. Like Darren was like staring at his leg in front of him.
Suddenly it starts to warp your mind.
Yeah.
In case we needed proof, we were at SIGGRAPH.
So one of the exciting things is the fact that the same rendering algorithms that you're using, and you can see at interactive frame rates, can translate into a final production frame. You know, this is Vray at real time, but Vray is used to render like a ton of visual effects for feature films. You know, and when you get both ends of the pipeline, the previs, the performance capture, the motion capture, under the same umbrella as the final product, you know, you're able to kind of connect the dots a lot quicker with a lot more clarity and ease of communication.
Right.
You can avoid a lot of question marks along the way. A director can be staring at a monitor in the performance capture, and if it can look like that, like a path traced image, and he can sign off on that kind of thing, that can create huge efficiencies to the rest of the pipeline. You know, he knows that's what he's going to see. You know,
right.
Months later, when the final effects and everything are completed. I think that's huge. I mean, so often the directors feel detached from the rest of the process, from the visual effects process. They're on set, they're very present for the live action shoot, and then maybe like once a week they're reviewing stuff, and from another state or something.
Right, exactly.
And obviously there's failures of communication, things break down. There's something that you get from the decision makers being on set, present, watching the process evolve as you
interacting
go.
in all those
and
little
everybody
decisions.
else can be on the same page.
Right.
It's a very organic, dynamic experience. So now, what else are we trying to do? Well, we're trying to replicate the live action process as much as possible. On set you got like your camera operators, and then you got your follow focus guy right next to him, like sending wireless commands to the camera. So we're trying to replicate that in MotionBuilder in a virtual production. So we 3D printed this little remote. We got it's an Arduino little microprocessor in there.
You're really hitting all the buzzwords these days, right? 3D printing.
Arduino. So now we can remotely, wirelessly send a bunch of commands to MotionBuilder, and again influence various parameters. So in this case, we're controlling focus distance and field of view. Again, play, start, record, the MotionBuilder centric commands.
Right.
And then the other thing that it's that clip behind the scenes that I showed you initially. That was just Skydome path tracing. That was so early. Now what we're trying to do is really advance it further. Here you can see we're adjusting depth of field in real time while the performance is playing out. And you also notice, like, at any time you can essentially freeze the scene state and let the path tracer catch up. Essentially, throw more samples into the pixel. They're going to get a higher fidelity product or visual image over time.
Right.
And then, so it's like, do I want to see a nice frame? Okay, just pause it for a second or two. Do I want to see it at interactive frame rate so I can really feel the scene as it evolves, like what's going on now? It'll be a little grainy, but at any time, just pause. It refines to a nice quality image. And this is just demonstrating that what can you do that you could do on a live action set. Well, you can obviously adjust lighting, again, physically based lighting. You can set dress, moving crates around and everything.
Right.
And then the camera parameters, field of view, depth stop, focus distance, all this stuff that is live action centric. We're now trying to port into
every decision you could make in a live action set now happening at the final kind of CG view level.
Exactly. I mean, white balance, like, talking with cinematographers now, and I'm like, what would you really want, like, to be able to apply this in a true production? And they're sending me like, the types of lights that they want to see, and we, all right, we'll just do HDRI like photos of a KinoFlow light, and then map that onto a Vray plane, and then you'll have your KinoFlow. Right. And then the Vray physical cameras, they got white balance parameters, so now you can balance the color temperature of the lights with your white balance of your camera. All this great stuff, shutter speed, shutter angle too, all this great stuff.
Stuff that's usually a little bit divorced from the CG side of things. It's right there.
And it's, again, now that this is existing in an entirely CG world, now you can think about kind of like hybridizing these responsibilities that between the live action world and the CG world. Your supervisors can be your cinematographers. Your layout artists can be the gaffer, grips, and production designers. And then on-set editorial, that live action fight sequence that I showed you, that was an edit that was cut together like that night or the day after. All right. Well, if you can be capturing this kind of path traced imagery with your virtual characters, why can't you have like an edit that looks like that cut together like that night?
Right.
And it's that much closer to a final product. And then I think there's efficiency gains too. I've been on live action sets, and I see a lot of like everybody standing around for hours, and then like a minute of activity, and then, you know, whereas in a virtual production in the CG world, you know, it's a lot of the artists are doing multiple responsibilities that you would see on a live action set. The same artist is modeling an environment, lighting the environment, and then set trussing the environment, and then rendering, compositing the environment. So like you can have fewer people doing, you know, more of the responsibilities. And again, you know, communication. If one artist is doing all this stuff, now there's not 10 people that you can get confused along the way.
And then the fact that, as you said earlier, the fact that everyone that is doing what would be normally primary shooting is also doing the CG side is also...
Yes.
There's no communication loss from the different stages of the pipeline as well.
Exactly. Yep. Now that this type of rendering can exist across more of the production, from previs all the way down to final product, is just going to really help with communication and, you know, clearly showing every department, every artist working on it, what the final product, you know, could be looking like. Now, when you can get all this rendering happening at the same time you're shooting performances, like now you can enable like the visual effects community or anybody to go in and, you know, that day be shooting content that looks pretty great. Now you could be shooting your own stories, and you know, you're not, and then paired with all this great GPU stuff, you're not reliant on a huge infrastructure to be able to, you know, render this kind of stuff.
Well, now when you think about it, you can just walk around SIGGRAPH, you can see the fact that, okay, so let's say I slap together, as you have, you know, 3S Max, building your assets and kind of being the host at the end of the thing. You've got MotionBuilder doing the capture. Yeah. The fact that motion capture volumes are getting ridiculously cheap and compared to what they were in past days. You've got some that don't even need the volume. You've got, you really can build quite the setup for just a few artists to make some really impressive projects at this point. I just want to thank you again for coming up for the interview, Kevin. This was awesome. Anyone who hasn't seen the videos on YouTube, there'll be some links here on the end of the video for you to go and watch them in all their glory with full sound, so please check those out. And otherwise, again, thank you very much for watching, and I'll talk to you all later.